Alex had never been a superstitious person, but lately, he'd begun to wonder if there was some truth to the old saying, when you need help, the universe gives you a sign. Maybe that was why he had clicked on the random video titled Elon Musk's Secret, 3 Foods to Stop Leg Cramps and Stay Strong. It was late, and Alex was exhausted from another 12-hour workday. The heavy ache in his legs had become his constant companion over the years. No matter what he tried, stretching, hot baths, sports massage, the leg cramps still came at night, sharp and painful, like knives digging into his muscles. But that night, sitting on his worn-out couch in his small, dimly lit apartment, Alex was scrolling through his phone, hoping for a distraction. He'd seen so many wellness videos that promised miraculous results, and yet none of them had lived up to their hype. He was about to skip past this one, but the title caught his attention. Something about Elon Musk had always intrigued him. A tech genius, a visionary, a man who seemed to have the answers to everything. Could this video possibly hold the secret to what had been plaguing him for years? What if the answer to your lifelong leg cramps has been out there all along? The opening sentence hooked him immediately. It sounded so simple, almost too good to be true. A strange sense of curiosity bloomed inside him. After all, Musk wasn't just a billionaire businessman, he was known for being someone who often defied expectations. Could he really have discovered a natural remedy for something as specific as leg cramps? Alex leaned forward, his eyes glued to the screen. The video started with Musk casually talking about his busy lifestyle, his intense schedule, his projects, his travels. But then, in a more serious tone, Musk began talking about something that caught Alex completely off guard, the 3 foods that had helped him stop his chronic leg cramps. Leg cramps are one of the most frustrating things to deal with, Musk said, looking directly into the camera. And it's not just about working out too much or not stretching enough. There's a deeper issue. A nutritional deficiency, often related to potassium, magnesium, or even vitamin D. But here's the thing, there are 3 foods I eat regularly that have completely changed the game for me. Alex's heart skipped a beat. The thought that something as simple as food could hold the key to his years of suffering seemed like a miracle. He'd been to doctors, physical therapists, and nutritionists. Every time, they told him the same thing, stay hydrated, stretch more, and take vitamins. But none of it worked. Could Musk, of all people, have the answer? Now, I'm not saying this will work for everyone, Musk continued, but these 3 foods have made a huge difference for me. And I bet they can do the same for you. The video flashed a title card that read, The 3 Musk Foods to Stop Leg Cramps, followed by a list of the 3 foods, spinach, bananas, and sweet potatoes. That was it. 3 simple, everyday foods. It didn't seem like much, but something about Musk's calm, confident delivery made it seem legitimate. There were no complicated diets or expensive supplements, just real food, natural and easily accessible. Alex felt a wave of excitement wash over him, quickly replaced by skepticism. Could it really be that simple? Spinach, bananas, and sweet potatoes. They didn't even seem like foods that would typically have much impact on leg cramps. But then again, he had tried everything else. What did he have to lose? His fingers hovered over the like button. The video had only been online for a few hours, but already it had thousands of views. It seemed to resonate with a lot of people. Could this be a genuine breakthrough? The camera zoomed in on Musk's face as he spoke the next words with an intensity that left no room for doubt. The key is consistency. You need to make these foods a regular part of your diet. Don't just try them for a few days and expect miracles. Give it time. And trust me, you'll start feeling the difference. Alex felt his heart race a little faster. Could this actually work? He'd never thought of food as a potential cure for something like leg cramps. Sure, he knew about the importance of nutrition, but no one had ever told him that eating these 3 specific foods could fix such a persistent problem. Without thinking, Alex paused the video and immediately searched for the foods Musk had recommended. He found several blog posts and articles that discussed their benefits, all of them claiming that they were rich in the vitamins and minerals that helped reduce muscle cramps. He even found some recipes that combined all three foods into one meal. It seemed like a no-brainer. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The video urged at the end, encouraging viewers to share their thoughts. Alex wasn't sure about the comment part, but he clicked the subscribe button, feeling an odd sense of determination rise within him. It was getting late, but the excitement from the video kept him wide awake. He quickly grabbed his phone and started making a grocery list. Spinach. Bananas. Sweet potatoes. It seemed too easy, too good to be true. But for the first time in years, Alex felt a flicker of hope. As he made his way to bed, he couldn't shake the thought that maybe, just maybe, this was the breakthrough he'd been waiting for. Tomorrow would be a new day. A day to try something different. But there was still one thing that lingered in his mind, nagging him with doubt. Could something as simple as food really be the answer to his lifelong struggle with leg cramps? The thought kept him awake for another hour, his mind spinning with possibilities. But no matter how much he doubted, he couldn't ignore the growing excitement inside him. Tomorrow, he would find out. Alex sat at the kitchen table the next morning, staring down at the grocery bag he had just unpacked. The spinach looked fresh, the bananas ripe with just the right amount of yellow, and the sweet potatoes were firm to the touch. He hadn't expected to be this excited about vegetables and fruit, but after watching that video the night before, something had shifted. It was as if a glimmer of hope had broken through the clouds of his daily routine. His phone buzzed on the table, another message from Jordan. Jordan, so, are you really doing this? Spinach, bananas, sweet potatoes. Musk's secret? Alex smiled to himself, tapping out a quick reply. Alex, yep, I'm going all in. Figured it's worth a shot, right? He couldn't help but feel a little silly, but after years of dealing with the same issue, chronic leg cramps that had plagued him for as long as he could remember, why not try something new? He'd done it all before, sports drinks, electrolytes, stretches, massages, even sleeping with heating pads. Nothing ever worked. But this? It felt different. Alex was no stranger to struggle. Growing up, he'd always been the kid with the bad legs. While other kids ran around at recess, sprinting and playing tag without a second thought, Alex was the one sitting on the sidelines, massaging his calves and wishing he could join in. His legs would cramp up at the most inconvenient times, at school, during soccer practice, even while he was sleeping. His body just didn't seem to cooperate. It started when he was about 10 years old. He remembered one summer day, when he and his friends were riding bikes down the street, laughing and racing toward the ice cream truck at the corner. It was a hot, bright afternoon, and Alex was pushing himself harder than usual, eager to keep up with his friends. Suddenly, as he pedaled furiously, a sharp pain shot through his left calf, locking his muscles in place. He collapsed to the ground, screaming in pain. His friends stopped and stared, unsure of what to do. "Are you okay?" one of them asked, but Alex couldn't answer. The cramp was so intense, all he could do was clutch his leg and wince. His mom had to come and pick him up, helping him to the car while his friends continued on without him. That was the moment Alex realized that his legs just weren't like everyone else's. It wasn't just a rare occurrence, it happened again and again, throughout his teenage years, during sports, and even at night while he slept. His mom, desperate to help him, took him to every doctor and specialist she could find. The diagnoses were always the same: dehydration, insufficient stretching, maybe even just growing pains. But nothing ever fully explained why Alex's cramps were so persistent, or why they seemed to worsen with age. No one had any answers, and the more time passed, the more frustrated Alex became. In high school, he learned to live with it. He was always the slowest runner on the track team. He had to quit football because his legs would seize up halfway through practice. Social gatherings like parties or sleepovers became a nightmare. He never knew if he'd be stuck lying in bed, waiting for the cramp to pass, or if he'd have to make a quick, painful exit in front of his friends. His body betrayed him time and time again. When Alex left for college, things didn't improve. The stress of studying, pulling all-nighters, and constantly sitting in uncomfortable positions only made the problem worse. His calves felt like they were perpetually on the verge of cramping, and his lower back often ached as well. The pain became a shadow that followed him everywhere. It wasn't until he started working full-time in a corporate office that he realized how much the cramps were affecting his daily life. Sitting in a chair all day, hunched over a computer, was a nightmare for his legs. By the time he left the office and headed home at night, his muscles felt like they were on fire. Some days, the cramps would hit him so suddenly, he couldn't even walk. He'd collapse into bed, trying to stretch his legs and hoping the pain would subside before he had to sleep. No matter how much he tried to take care of his body, drinking water, exercising, eating healthier, it didn't seem to matter. And then, there was that video. Alex hadn't expected much when he clicked on it, but the idea that 3 simple foods could change everything intrigued him. The foods weren't magical, and Alex knew that. It wasn't like he could suddenly eat spinach and banish cramps forever. But he had nothing left to lose. He'd tried the expensive supplements and fancy treatments that promised results, only to end up disappointed. Could these 3 foods really work? He sighed, running his fingers through his hair. Maybe it was desperation talking, but the possibility that he might find something that finally worked, after all these years, felt like a lifeline. For once, he didn't feel hopeless. As Alex unpacked his groceries, his phone buzzed again. "Jordan, so what's the plan?" "Spinach smoothie for breakfast, banana for lunch, and sweet potato fries for dinner." Alex laughed out loud. He could already picture it, him, standing in front of his fridge, blending spinach with some frozen berries, trying to convince himself that this was his ticket to a pain-free life. But that wasn't all. There was something else, something deeper, that had driven Alex to try this new approach. He'd always wanted to prove to himself that he wasn't someone who had to accept pain as a permanent part of his life. It wasn't just about getting rid of cramps, it was about reclaiming control over his body, over his health. He didn't want to keep hiding behind the excuse that his legs were just broken. He wanted to be strong again, to run, to play sports, to feel free. And maybe, just maybe, these 3 foods would help him take the first step toward that freedom. The journey wouldn't be easy, and there were no guarantees. But Alex knew one thing for sure, he had to try. "Tomorrow, I'll start fresh," he thought. "Spinach, bananas, and sweet potatoes. It's a start. Maybe it'll work." He looked at the clock. It was time to go to bed, but the excitement lingered. For the first time in a long while, he felt something he hadn't felt in years, hope. The first day felt like a test. Alex had woken up early, determined to get things right. His kitchen was filled with the bright colors of fresh produce, bright green spinach, golden bananas, and smooth sweet potatoes, all waiting for him to give them a shot. He stood there, staring at them for a moment, as if the foods themselves might hold the answers to all his problems. Could it really be this simple? He thought again, feeling the usual wave of skepticism. But the promise of freedom from the constant pain gnawed at him, and for the first time, he felt a strange mix of excitement and doubt. He wanted to believe it would work. The morning began with the spinach smoothie. He had found a recipe online that combined spinach, a banana, and some almond milk, a combination that seemed almost too easy. He grabbed the blender, tossed in the spinach and banana, poured in some almond milk, and blended everything together. The result was a vibrant green concoction that looked far less appealing than he'd hoped, but he wasn't here for looks. He was here for results. He took a deep breath and sipped. It wasn't awful, but it wasn't exactly delicious either. The spinach left a slightly bitter aftertaste, and the banana gave it an almost strange sweetness. Still, he managed to drink it down, reminding himself that he had to stick with this. If these 3 foods really could help him, then a few awkward mornings of spinach smoothies wouldn't be such a big deal. The day wore on, and as he sat at his desk, Alex kept his mind on the task at hand. He'd eaten the banana for a mid-morning snack, as suggested in the video, and by lunchtime, he was looking forward to his next challenge, the sweet potato. It wasn't like he had never eaten sweet potatoes before, but today felt different. This wasn't just food. It was part of a new approach, part of the plan to fix what had been broken for so long. He prepped the sweet potato carefully, baking it in the oven and adding just a pinch of sea salt and a little bit of cinnamon. As the scent filled the apartment, he couldn't help but feel a bit of pride. It wasn't much, but it was a start, a small but deliberate step toward change. Still, by the time the day ended, Alex couldn't shake the underlying sense of uncertainty. Could something this simple really have an impact? He'd been so used to complex treatments and advice from experts that the idea of relying on just a few foods felt like a shot in the dark. He couldn't remember the last time he'd felt truly hopeful about a solution to his problem. But here he was, sticking with it. Maybe tomorrow will be better, he thought as he prepared for bed. He was going to give this a full week before passing judgment. One day wasn't enough to tell if the foods would work. That night, as he lay in bed, he thought about the aches in his legs. There it was again, that familiar tension in his calves, that gnawing feeling that a cramp might strike any moment. He tried to relax, focusing on breathing deeply, but the discomfort was persistent. Not tonight, he willed. Not tonight. Just as he was beginning to drift off, his calf spasmed, sharp, violent. The cramp hit without warning, causing him to jolt upright, gripping his leg in pain. His heart raced as the cramp tightened and twisted. This can't be happening, Alex thought, his mind spiraling. I just started trying this. What if it doesn't work? What if it never works? The pain was unbearable, the kind of agony that left him gasping for air, and the feeling of defeat hit him with full force. He massaged the muscle, trying to alleviate the tension, but it felt like the cramp would never release. It took what felt like an eternity for it to finally ease up, and when it did, Alex was left exhausted and frustrated, staring at the ceiling. He couldn't believe it. After just one day of following Musk's advice, nothing had changed. The cramp still came. The discomfort hadn't vanished. Maybe it was too good to be true, he thought bitterly, rolling over and pulling the blanket tighter around him. But as the discomfort faded and he settled into bed, something else nagged at him. No, he thought. This can't be the end. I've been fighting this for years. I'm not giving up after just one day. The next morning, Alex's thoughts were muddled. He still felt the residue of the previous night's cramp in his legs, but the fatigue that had followed it felt strangely familiar. He had learned to live with the constant discomfort, the dull ache that lingered even after the cramps had passed. It was just part of his life, like a shadow he couldn't escape. But then he remembered something Musk had said in the video: consistency is key. Alex realized that his impatience was betraying him. He had only just begun this journey, and one night of pain wasn't a reason to quit. He had to stick with it. He grabbed the spinach, the bananas, and the sweet potatoes once again, preparing his smoothie with a little more determination this time. As he drank it down, he repeated the words in his head like a mantra: consistency is key. The rest of the day passed like a blur, and by the evening, Alex couldn't deny the nagging thought in the back of his mind. Would it really work? Could it? That night, when he climbed into bed, he tried to shake off the lingering doubts. The cramp hadn't hit him yet, but he knew it could come at any time. Just stay hopeful, he told himself. Stay consistent. His legs were already tense, but he kept his mind calm. And for the first time in months, he fell asleep without the searing pain waking him up. As the days went on, Alex fell into a rhythm with his new routine. He began to prepare his meals in advance, each morning, a spinach smoothie, each afternoon, a banana, and by dinner, he'd have a baked sweet potato waiting for him. At first, it felt like a chore. Just another box to check off, but over time, he began to appreciate the simplicity. The act of focusing on these 3 foods became a kind of ritual for him, a small but consistent act of self-care. He had always been a person who took the easy way out when it came to health, quick fixes, the latest fad diets, or something that promised instant results. But there was something different about this approach. This time, he wasn't looking for an overnight miracle. He was looking for something sustainable, something real. Alex was starting to feel a sense of pride in sticking with it. 1 week passed. The cramps hadn't come back, at least not with the same intensity. It was a Saturday morning when Alex first noticed the difference. He woke up feeling unusually rested. No stiffness in his legs. No soreness or discomfort. He swung his legs over the edge of the bed and stood up, carefully, cautiously, as he had learned to do over the years. He expected that familiar twinge in his calves, the sharp warning of a cramp about to strike. But nothing came. He walked across his bedroom and then down the hallway, flexing his muscles. Still nothing. Alex froze in place. Was it possible? Had the cramps finally stopped? The silence was deafening in his mind. For the first time in years, there was no fear that the cramp would strike at any moment. His legs felt free. It was as if he had just stepped out of a fog that had been clouding his life for so long. The thought of it, of not having to live in constant anticipation of pain, was almost too much to take in. But he wasn't ready to call it a victory just yet. Alex knew all too well that his body could be unpredictable. One good morning didn't mean he was out of the woods. He had to keep going, keep following the routine, and not get ahead of himself. As the day wore on, Alex found himself becoming more active. He went for a walk in the park, something he hadn't been able to do without discomfort for years. It was a small victory, but it felt monumental. The muscles in his legs moved fluidly, without hesitation. He wasn't thinking about his cramps every step of the way. He was free to enjoy the walk, the fresh air, and the sound of his footsteps on the gravel path. It wasn't until he reached the bench near the pond, sitting down to rest for a few minutes, that the full impact of the day hit him. He had spent so many years avoiding these small joys, the walks, the hikes, the spontaneous runs, but today, for the first time in a long while, he felt like he could actually live his life without constantly worrying about when his legs might betray him. The cramps might not be gone forever, Alex thought, but they were better. And that was enough for now. He sat on the bench for a while, letting the moment sink in. It wasn't just about the food. Sure, spinach, bananas, and sweet potatoes had played a part, but it was more than that. The shift in his mindset was just as important. The consistency, the belief that there was a way forward, had made all the difference. He wasn't just relying on the foods to fix him, he was relying on himself to stay disciplined and keep moving forward. It felt like he was finally breaking free from the prison he'd created around himself, a prison of doubt and fear and constant pain. That night, Alex decided to go for a jog. He had never been much of a runner, his legs just couldn't handle it. But tonight, something inside him stirred. The desire to test himself, to see just how far he could push, was too strong to ignore. He laced up his sneakers, stepped out the door, and started with a slow jog down the street. At first, it was awkward, like his body didn't quite know what to do with the freedom. He'd been so used to taking it easy, to protecting his legs from the inevitable cramps, but now he felt lighter. The movement came more easily than he'd expected. As he jogged, his thoughts raced. He wasn't sure how far he would go, but he felt good, better than he had in years. He kept his pace slow and steady, aware that this was a test. His muscles still felt tense at times, but the familiar sharp pains didn't come. By the time he reached the park again, he had gone farther than he'd thought. He wasn't winded, and his legs weren't on fire. The relief he felt in that moment was overwhelming. For so long, he'd believed that his body was just broken, that the cramps would always be there to haunt him. But now, he was beginning to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was a way out of it. He slowed to a walk, breathing deeply, and leaned against a tree. There was no cramp in sight. His legs weren't screaming for mercy. He could walk, jog, move without fear. And for the first time in years, he realized that it wasn't just about avoiding pain, it was about reclaiming his life. When he got home, Alex felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. He showered and collapsed into bed, but his mind raced. He thought about all the days he had wasted, avoiding the activities he loved. He thought about all the times he had told himself that he couldn't, that his legs would never cooperate. But tonight, he had proved himself wrong. As he lay there, his body sore but not broken, a new thought started to form in his mind: what if I can do more? What if this is just the beginning? The next morning, when Alex woke up, the familiar tension in his legs was nowhere to be found. He moved through the day with ease, walking, stretching, even tackling a few more physical tasks. He felt like his body was finally his again. And though he knew that cramps might return in the future, today felt different. Today, Alex felt strong. The morning after his run was the first time in weeks that Alex woke up with a sense of genuine optimism. His legs didn't feel stiff, and the faint muscle soreness from his jog had subsided by the time he stretched his limbs. It was like waking up from a long, painful dream and finding himself in a new reality, one where pain didn't rule his every move. Yet, as he prepared for the day, he couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something was just a bit too perfect. Deep down, a tiny voice whispered, "It's too good to last." He tried to shake it off. He had worked hard for this. He had stuck to the routine. But there was a weight that came with that kind of progress, a weight that Alex had learned to carry over the years. Each time he made progress, he feared the inevitable downfall. The cramps could strike again, and he wasn't sure if he could handle it. He went about his day, the usual routine of spinach smoothies, bananas, and sweet potatoes, and everything seemed to be going smoothly. By the time he reached dinner, however, something began to feel off. His stomach wasn't quite right. It was a subtle discomfort at first, nothing major, just a dull sensation that he couldn't ignore. He assumed it was just his body adjusting, that he was still getting used to the routine. But as the night wore on, the discomfort didn't fade. It grew. Slowly at first, then rapidly increasing in intensity. By the time he got into bed, he could feel the tension in his legs creeping up again. The familiar tightness returned, but this time it felt different. It wasn't just the usual discomfort he had learned to live with, it was an insistent pain, the kind that no amount of stretching or massaging could ease. His heart began to race. No, he thought, this can't be happening. Not again. The cramp hit just after midnight. It wasn't the first time he'd woken up to the agony of a cramp, but this time, it felt like a betrayal. The tightness in his calf muscles seized him with a force so sharp that it took his breath away. He groaned, pulling himself upright and grabbing his leg, but the pain was relentless. It twisted and pulsed, mocking his efforts to stay calm. His body trembled with the force of the cramp, but more than the physical pain, it was the wave of disappointment that hit him hardest. Had all of this been for nothing? He had been so close to believing that the routine, the consistency, the foods, had finally freed him. But now it was all slipping through his fingers, like sand that couldn't be held. The cramp lasted longer than usual, and for the first time, Alex found himself teetering on the edge of despair. His hope, built carefully and cautiously over the last few weeks, felt fragile now. How could he face another cycle of pain and relief, pain and relief? Was this just what life was going to be now? It wasn't just the physical discomfort that tore at him. It was the emotional exhaustion of fighting a battle he had grown tired of fighting. The fear that no matter how hard he tried, no matter what foods he ate, he would never be free. When the cramp finally released its grip on him, Alex collapsed back into the bed, drenched in sweat, his heart still pounding. The sudden emotional crash hit him like a wave, pulling him deeper into the pit of frustration and helplessness. He wanted to scream, to throw everything out the window and give up. But the logical part of his mind, the part that had kept him going through all of this, whispered that he had to keep trying. The pain of the cramp was still there, but the bigger hurt was the way it had made him feel, powerless. All the effort, all the hope, had suddenly felt like a cruel joke. Was he really in control of his body, or was he just at the mercy of an unpredictable curse? The next morning, when Alex awoke, he felt worse than he had in a long time. His legs were sore, not from exercise, but from the aftermath of the cramp. He moved slowly, almost hesitantly, feeling the weight of the previous night's disappointment. The familiar dread that had once accompanied the cramps was creeping back into his thoughts. He stared at the spinach, the bananas, the sweet potatoes, his tools for healing. Was this really enough? He wondered. Was he just fooling himself, pretending that these simple foods could undo years of pain and frustration? Was this all there was? But then, something inside him shifted. It was subtle at first, almost imperceptible, but it was there. He remembered something Musk had said in the video, change doesn't happen overnight. And Alex knew this was true. He had been thinking of the cramps in terms of an instant fix, a quick and miraculous change, but life didn't work that way. There was no magic bullet, no miracle cure. It wasn't about the quick fix. It was about sticking with it, even when things didn't go perfectly. As he sat there, sipping his smoothie, he realized something important. The journey was never going to be linear. There would be setbacks. There would be days when everything felt like it was falling apart. But that didn't mean the progress wasn't real. The fact that he had gone a few days without cramps was progress, even if this particular setback made him feel like he had lost it all. He wasn't starting over, he was building on what he had already achieved. Alex closed his eyes for a moment, breathing in deeply. His legs were sore, and the fear still lingered in his chest, but he refused to let that fear dictate his actions. He would not give up on the small steps that had already brought him this far. He would keep going, even when it felt impossible. The path ahead was uncertain, and there would be more nights like last night. But Alex was learning something vital. Strength wasn't just in overcoming pain, it was in learning to navigate it. It was in finding the resilience to keep moving forward, even when the way ahead seemed impossible. That night, he lay in bed again, his body sore but not defeated. The cramp hadn't returned, and though the tension in his legs was still there, he found himself hoping for a better day tomorrow. A day where he wouldn't just survive, but thrive. The days that followed the setback were not easy. Alex woke up each morning with a lingering tension in his body, aware that his legs could betray him at any moment. The fear of the cramp returning hung over him like a dark cloud, but he also knew deep down that he couldn't let that fear control him. The weight of it, of knowing that he had come so close to breaking through only to be knocked back down, was heavy, but he refused to give up. As he followed his routine of eating spinach, bananas, and sweet potatoes, he realized that he had been focused too much on the idea of an immediate fix. The cramps weren't something that could be wiped away in a day, or even a week. He had to accept that healing, true healing, was going to take time. And so, Alex made a conscious decision. He would stop focusing on the moments of failure, the setbacks that were inevitable. Instead, he would shift his mindset to the victories, the small wins that he had already achieved. The fact that he had made it through several days without cramps at all, the fact that he had pushed himself to go for that run, those were successes. They didn't feel like much in the face of the setback, but they were milestones nonetheless. One morning, a few days after the cramp, Alex stood in front of the mirror as he got ready for the day. He noticed something subtle but important, his reflection. There was a certain calmness in his face now, a steadiness that hadn't been there before. It wasn't that the fear of cramps had disappeared, he knew that would take time. But he had begun to see his body differently. It wasn't just a source of frustration and pain. It was a source of strength, too. He had learned to listen to it more closely, to respect its limits without succumbing to them. The cramps were still a part of his story, but they no longer defined him. And so, when the day came for him to test himself again, he felt a quiet confidence that had been missing in the past. He went for a walk that morning, and then another later in the afternoon. His legs felt strong, but even if they didn't, he was ready to face whatever came next. For the first time in his life, he wasn't just surviving the cramps, he was learning to thrive despite them. That evening, as he prepared his dinner, Alex couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. The journey hadn't been perfect, and it still wasn't over, but it had been real. The pain had been part of it, but so had the resilience, the learning, and the growth. He sat down to eat, his plate full of roasted sweet potatoes, spinach, and a banana on the side. As he took a bite, he smiled to himself. For the first time, it wasn't about how much further he had to go. It was about how far he had already come. The following week, something incredible happened. His legs continued to feel strong. The cramps didn't vanish entirely, but they became less frequent, less intense, and less of a threat. He could move through his day without constantly fearing the next attack. He could walk for miles without hesitation, stretching his legs without the familiar sense of dread. The transformation was gradual, but it was undeniable. Alex could finally see that the food, the habits, the discipline, it had all worked. It wasn't the perfect solution, but it had created the foundation for something sustainable. He felt stronger, physically and emotionally. And most importantly, he felt empowered. That night, as he settled into bed, he realized that the cramp might return again someday. His journey wasn't over. But he also realized that it didn't matter. The fear of the cramps had no hold over him anymore. He was no longer bound by it. He had built resilience, and that was something the cramps couldn't take away. Alex thought about the journey he had gone through, the ups and downs, the moments of doubt and hope, the pain and the healing. And he understood, deep in his bones, that the true lesson wasn't in avoiding the cramps. It was in how he had faced them, how he had continued to move forward, and how he had found strength in the struggle. For the first time in years, Alex felt like he had truly reclaimed his life. The cramps were no longer his greatest enemy. The real challenge, the real battle, had always been within himself, to believe, to stay strong, and to keep going. And now, he knew that no matter what life threw at him next, he was ready. The weeks that followed were a mix of triumphs and frustrations. Alex's body was changing, slowly but surely, but there were still moments when the familiar pang of doubt crept in. The fear of the cramps returning, the fear that it had all been too good to be true, still lingered in the back of his mind. However, as he continued to follow the routine of spinach smoothies, bananas, and sweet potatoes, Alex began to realize something incredibly important: it wasn't just about what he ate. It was about the consistency, the small, everyday actions that he had committed to, day in and day out. It wasn't always glamorous. There were days when he didn't feel like eating another spinach smoothie, or when the thought of another banana seemed redundant. But he kept doing it because he knew that consistency was what would make the difference. One evening, as he sat down to eat his usual meal, Alex felt a quiet sense of pride. The cramps hadn't come back in a while, he was still in the clear, and his legs were feeling stronger than ever. He had made it through the hard part, or so he thought. But as he dug into his sweet potatoes, he couldn't shake the feeling that something was missing. He had become so focused on the physical aspect of his recovery that he hadn't paid attention to his emotional health. And now, as he sat there in the quiet of his apartment, he realized that he was still carrying the weight of everything that had happened, the years of struggle, the frustration, and the constant fear of the cramps. It wasn't just his legs that needed healing, it was his mind and his heart. Alex knew that he couldn't just push through everything anymore. He had learned the hard way that ignoring the emotional side of healing would only lead to burnout. The physical progress was important, but it was the emotional resilience that would make the difference in the long run. As he continued his journey, he decided to give himself permission to slow down when needed. There were days when he didn't want to do the routine. There were days when he felt like the weight of the world was still on his shoulders, and he wanted to collapse under the pressure. But he refused to give up. Instead, he would focus on the small victories, the times when his legs felt strong, when he could walk without hesitation, when he didn't have to worry about the cramps. The next few weeks were a test of his commitment to consistency. It wasn't always easy to stay disciplined. There were moments when he wanted to abandon the routine, to skip a meal or two, or even give in to the old habits that had brought him comfort in the past. But Alex stayed strong. He recognized that it was these moments, these small acts of consistency, that would ultimately shape his future. One particular morning, Alex woke up feeling great. He had slept through the night without waking up to the sharp pain of a cramp. The sun was shining, and he could hear birds singing outside his window. He stretched and stood up, feeling the familiar stiffness in his legs but nothing that made him panic. He walked around his apartment, taking each step with confidence. This was the kind of morning he had been waiting for. But as he prepared his spinach smoothie, something unexpected happened. As he bent down to grab the blender from the cabinet, a sharp pain shot through his calf. It was like an old wound had been reopened. For a moment, his breath caught in his chest, and his heart raced. Was this it? Was the cramp back? He quickly straightened up, his hand instinctively clutching his leg, trying to massage out the discomfort. The pain was fleeting, just a brief, sharp sensation. But the fear that it could come back full force was real. Alex felt his stomach tighten, his mind racing with worst-case scenarios. Maybe it's just a fluke, he thought. Maybe it's nothing. But the doubt lingered. For the next few hours, he found himself walking cautiously, his mind replaying the painful memory of his past cramps. He kept his movements slow, almost hesitant, as if he were waiting for the pain to strike again. It was hard to shake off the feeling that the cramps could return at any moment. His mind was flooded with what-ifs. What if this was the beginning of another cycle? What if everything he had worked for was slipping through his fingers? But as the day went on, Alex forced himself to focus on the present. He reminded himself of how far he had come, of the mornings when he woke up pain-free, of the walks he had taken without fear, of the consistency he had built over the past few weeks. He refused to let one moment of discomfort undo all the progress he had made. That evening, as he sat on his couch, Alex reflected on the fear that had gripped him earlier in the day. He realized that the fear wasn't just about the cramps. It was about not being in control. For so long, his life had been dictated by the pain in his legs, and he had learned to fear it more than anything. But now, even though the cramps still had the power to shock him, Alex had learned that he didn't have to be ruled by them. The power of consistency, of keeping up the routine, of sticking to the foods that were healing him, was his way of taking control. It wasn't about perfection, it was about persistence. The next morning, Alex woke up with a new sense of determination. His legs were sore from yesterday's walk, but there was no sign of a cramp. He moved through his day with more confidence, allowing himself to enjoy the progress without the constant worry that the pain would return. He knew that setbacks could still come, but he was learning to take them in stride. Each day was a new opportunity to practice consistency, to move forward, even when it felt hard. The weeks following Alex's realization about consistency were a constant push and pull between progress and setbacks. His legs felt stronger, yes, but his mind still wasn't fully at peace. Every time he made progress, there was a lingering worry: what if it all goes wrong? The cramps had been a constant shadow in his life, and even though the situation was improving, the fear of their return loomed large. It was the small things that threw him off balance now. He had learned to follow his diet and exercise routine religiously, but life had a way of throwing curveballs when you least expected them. One day, he woke up feeling more energetic than usual. He stretched, feeling the familiar stiffness in his calves but nothing more than that. No pain, no cramping. He felt optimistic as he prepared his breakfast, a spinach smoothie and a banana, his go-to morning fuel. But as he sat down at the table to eat, his phone buzzed. It was a message from his sister, Zoe. "Hey, I'm in town for the weekend. Want to catch up?" Alex's first instinct was to reply with excitement. Zoe had always been the person who could make him laugh even on his worst days. But then, as he thought about it, a subtle unease settled in. A weekend of catching up meant eating out. It meant indulgent meals, rich in things he had spent weeks avoiding. Would he stick to his routine? Would he let one weekend derail everything he'd worked for? The old Alex, the one who felt like he had to control everything, would have said no. He would have made excuses about being too busy or not feeling well enough to go out. But that wasn't the man he had become. He had worked hard to not let the fear of indulgence control him, and this was his chance to prove that. Still, a knot formed in his stomach. The prospect of deviating from his routine, even for just a few days, made him nervous. What if the weekend triggered the cramps again? What if the relaxation of his routine caused a setback? The balance between enjoying life and sticking to his goals felt delicate, and he wasn't sure how much room he had to allow for the unexpected. As the weekend approached, Alex wrestled with his feelings. The thought of seeing Zoe, of laughing together and reconnecting, made him excited. But there was also a fear he couldn't quite shake. It wasn't just about the food. It was about his ability to stay on track while also enjoying life. Could he balance both? Could he have his cake and eat it too, without sabotaging everything he had worked for? On Friday afternoon, Zoe arrived in town, and the moment she walked through the door, Alex was hit with a flood of nostalgia. The familiar warmth of her presence, the easy banter, and the comfort of knowing that no matter how much time passed, they would always have each other. They went out to dinner at one of their favorite spots, a cozy little Italian restaurant in the heart of the city. The place smelled like garlic and fresh bread, and the wine list was extensive. Zoe ordered a bottle of red wine, and they both toasted to their reunion. The menu was filled with indulgent dishes, pasta, pizza, and decadent desserts. Alex found himself eyeing the creamy pastas and the gooey mozzarella with a sense of longing. It had been weeks since he'd eaten anything like this. But there was also a voice in the back of his mind telling him to stick to his plan. Just one meal, he thought. It's just one meal. You can get back on track tomorrow. For a moment, Alex was unsure. He could see the hesitation in Zoe's eyes, too. She knew how hard he'd worked to get better, and she wanted him to enjoy his life, to enjoy this time with her. But she also knew how much this routine had meant to him. Alex's heart raced. The thought of letting go of his discipline, even for a single meal, seemed like a dangerous path to take. What if the food triggered the cramps again? What if he let his guard down and went back to square one? But then Zoe reached across the table and placed her hand on his. "You're doing amazing, Alex. But you don't have to be perfect all the time. We're here to enjoy life, right? Let's make memories, not stress over every bite." Her words hit him like a wave. He realized that she was right. He had spent so much time trying to perfect every aspect of his life, his diet, his routine, his recovery, that he had forgotten to let himself live. It was about balance, about learning to enjoy the moments without letting fear take over. With a deep breath, Alex smiled at Zoe. "Okay, you're right. Let's enjoy this." He decided to order the pasta, one of his favorites, and indulge without guilt. For the first time in a long while, he gave himself permission to eat without stressing over the consequences. As the meal arrived and the rich aroma of garlic and cheese filled the air, Alex felt something shift inside him. It wasn't just the indulgence, it was the release of tension. The fear that had been weighing him down for so long started to lift, just a little. They spent the rest of the evening laughing, reminiscing about old memories, and enjoying each other's company. The meal was delicious, and as they savored every bite, Alex realized that life was about more than just following a routine. It was about embracing the joy of the moment, about finding balance between self-care and living fully. The next morning, Alex woke up with the same familiar stiffness in his legs, but there was no cramp. His heart had been a little lighter the night before, and it seemed like that lightness carried into the next day. He felt better than he had expected, and for the first time, he understood that one indulgent meal wouldn't ruin everything he had worked for. It was about consistency, not perfection. It was about showing up for himself every day, even when life threw curveballs. By the time the weekend came to an end, Alex had learned something invaluable. The balance wasn't just in the foods he ate or the routines he followed, it was in how he allowed himself to experience life without guilt. Yes, there would be challenges along the way, but he had the tools to handle them. More importantly, he had learned that living well wasn't just about being disciplined, it was about being present. The next few weeks seemed almost too good to be true. Alex had found a rhythm, a new balance. His legs were feeling strong, and the cramps had become a distant memory. He had learned to navigate life with more ease, no longer weighed down by the constant fear of another painful episode. He even began to take longer walks in the mornings and started adding a light jog to his routine. It was liberating, his body felt free, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was living his life on his own terms. But as is often the case with healing, both physical and emotional, the road ahead is rarely a straight line. It's often marked by unexpected twists and turns, challenges that you never saw coming. And one crisp morning, Alex was about to face one of those very challenges. It started like any other morning. He woke up early, stretching as he slowly rolled out of bed. His legs felt good, slightly stiff, but nothing that concerned him. The sun was just starting to filter through his window, casting a soft glow across the room. He went through his usual routine, preparing his spinach smoothie and cutting up his banana. As he sipped the smoothie and looked out the window, Alex felt a sense of calm settle over him. But that calm was short-lived. As he bent down to pick up his shoes from the floor, he felt it, a sharp, sudden pain shooting through his calf. It was like a bolt of lightning, searing through his muscle. His heart skipped a beat. The unmistakable feeling of a cramp gripped him, tight and fierce. For a moment, Alex froze, his breath caught in his throat. The pain was brief, but intense. As quickly as it arrived, it subsided, leaving him shaking and staring down at his leg. He couldn't believe it. After weeks of progress, after all the work he had put in to prevent this, it had happened again. What went wrong? He thought, panic creeping up his spine. I've been so careful. I've been doing everything right. Alex limped to the kitchen, trying to shake off the aftereffects of the cramp. His thoughts were a blur. This couldn't be happening. He had built his life around this recovery. The cramps were supposed to be a thing of the past. What was the point of all the hard work if this was just going to happen again? The doubt crept in quickly, like an unwelcome guest. What if this was just the beginning of another cycle? What if he would never truly escape the cramps? What if his body was always going to betray him in the end? Shaking, Alex grabbed his phone and texted Zoe. "Hey, I just had a cramp. I thought I was past this. What if it's never going to get better?" Her reply came quickly, "It's okay, Alex. You've come so far. This is just one setback. You're stronger than you think. Don't let it throw you off course." Her words were a small comfort, but Alex couldn't shake the frustration and fear that gripped him. He had worked so hard, and now it felt like all of it had been for nothing. His body, it seemed, was always going to be his enemy. He spent the rest of the morning replaying the cramp in his head. What had he done wrong? He had followed his routine, stuck to his diet, and taken things slow. He couldn't figure it out. The mystery of why it had happened again gnawed at him, and the sense of powerlessness that came with it was overwhelming. As the day went on, Alex found himself restless. He tried to distract himself by going for a walk, but his mind wouldn't stop racing. He couldn't shake the feeling that the cramp was a sign that he was back to square one, that he would always be trapped in a cycle of progress and failure, never truly free. But there was something in the back of his mind that refused to let him give up. He had faced hardships before, many of them much worse than this. This wasn't the end. He had to remember the lessons he had learned. He had to find a way to push through, to keep going despite the setback. That evening, as he sat alone with his thoughts, Alex reflected on everything he had gone through, the struggles, the triumphs, the fear, and the healing. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had made him stronger. He couldn't afford to let one cramp derail everything. The next morning, Alex woke up early again, his legs sore but not in pain. He decided to go for a walk, determined to get back on track. He wasn't going to let this setback define him. As he walked through the park, the crisp air biting at his skin, he realized something important: setbacks were inevitable. They were part of the journey. It wasn't about avoiding them, it was about how he responded to them. He could choose to let this one cramp derail everything, or he could choose to see it as just a small bump in the road. Alex walked on, feeling the strength in his legs, the fresh air filling his lungs, and for the first time since the cramp, he felt a sense of peace. He wasn't going to let fear control him anymore. He wasn't going to let one moment of pain make him forget all the progress he had made. The cramps would come and go, but they didn't define him. He would keep moving forward, one step at a time. It had been a week since the cramp returned, and Alex still couldn't fully shake the feeling of defeat that had settled in his chest. Despite his best efforts to move forward, the fear of failure continued to hover over him like a dark cloud. He had spent days questioning everything: his routines, his food choices, his very approach to recovery. Was he really going to spend his entire life battling his body, constantly looking over his shoulder for the next setback? Yet, even as the doubt gnawed at him, something deeper began to stir inside Alex. It wasn't just the cramps he had been fighting, it was the fear of not being good enough. The fear that no matter how hard he tried, he would always fall short, always be plagued by this physical limitation that controlled his life. But the more he thought about it, the more he realized that it wasn't the cramp itself that was his true battle, it was his mindset. The mind had a strange power. Alex had learned that over the past few months. He had thought that healing was simply a matter of following the right steps, sticking to a plan, and being disciplined. But now, after everything that had happened, he understood that true healing started from within. The physical changes were important, yes, but the mental and emotional shifts were just as crucial. One evening, as Alex sat on the couch, reflecting on how far he had come, he received a text from Zoe: "Hey, I've been thinking about you. You've made so much progress, and I'm proud of you. But I also think it's time to let go of some of that fear." Alex paused at the message. Let go of the fear. The words lingered in his mind. He hadn't realized how much fear had been dictating his choices, how much control it had over his life. He had spent so much time worrying about what might go wrong that he hadn't fully embraced the victories he had already achieved. Zoe's message was like a wake-up call. It's time to let go of the fear. That night, Alex lay in bed, replaying the events of the past few months. He thought about the first time he had felt a cramp, the anger and frustration that had consumed him. He thought about the weeks he spent obsessing over every small detail, convinced that if he didn't control everything, he would fail. But then, he thought about the moments of breakthrough, the walks in the park, the meals with Zoe, the days when his legs felt stronger than they ever had. Those moments had come when he allowed himself to let go, when he stopped trying to force everything into perfection. Maybe that's the key, Alex thought. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about showing up every day, no matter what, and trusting that I'm doing the best I can. The next morning, Alex woke up with a renewed sense of clarity. The cramp still lingered in the back of his mind, but today, he chose not to fear it. He chose to acknowledge it, to accept that setbacks were a part of the process, and that they didn't define him. His body was resilient, and so was his mind. It was time to embrace both. He put on his shoes, grabbed his water bottle, and stepped outside for a walk. The sun was already rising, casting a warm glow across the street. There was a cool breeze in the air, and the world felt fresh, like it was waiting for him to make the next move. As he walked through the neighborhood, Alex thought about how much his perspective had shifted. He had been so focused on the destination, on eradicating the cramps once and for all, that he had forgotten to enjoy the journey. Healing wasn't just about getting to a place where he was fixed. It was about learning to live with the ups and downs, to be okay with the uncertainty, and to trust that he could handle whatever came his way. By the time Alex reached the park, he felt a sense of peace wash over him. He sat down on a bench, looking out over the water, the early morning mist still rising. There were no cramps today, no pain, just the soft rhythm of his breath and the gentle sway of the trees in the wind. He realized then that this was the moment of transformation, not just the absence of cramps, but the acceptance of life as it was, with all its imperfections. For the first time in months, Alex smiled to himself. He wasn't fighting anymore. He wasn't trying to outrun the fear. He was simply living, one step at a time. In that moment, he knew that the cramps, the setbacks, the struggles, they would always be a part of his journey. But they no longer had the power to control him. He had the power now. He had the power to choose his path, to accept the challenges, and to keep moving forward. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? The morning after his walk in the park, Alex woke up with a deep sense of calm. It was as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. The tightness in his legs was still there, the reminder of his journey, but it no longer felt like an enemy. It was just part of the process. He didn't need to conquer it, he just needed to live with it, with grace and patience. He had spent so much time trying to control every aspect of his life. He thought that if he could just follow the right plan, stay disciplined, and avoid all the possible pitfalls, he would be free from the cramping. But the truth he had discovered was that life wasn't about control, it was about flow. It was about knowing when to fight and when to surrender, when to push forward and when to step back and allow space for healing. As Alex prepared for his day, he found himself thinking about all the people who had supported him. Zoe's encouragement, his friends, and even his own determination had gotten him this far. But he realized that it wasn't just their support, it was his own inner strength, his own ability to adapt and learn, that had been the driving force behind his transformation. He had faced countless challenges, but each time, he had risen, learned, and grown stronger. The past few months had been a journey, one filled with setbacks, moments of doubt, and occasional victories. But those moments of doubt had been essential. Without them, he wouldn't have learned the true meaning of perseverance. Without the pain, he wouldn't have found the strength to keep going. Each struggle had led to a new understanding of himself. Alex sat down at his kitchen table, sipping his coffee and reflecting on how far he had come. It wasn't just about the physical change in his body. It was about the mental and emotional shifts he had gone through. He had learned that healing was not a destination, it was a journey. And along the way, he had discovered that true strength didn't lie in never falling, but in the ability to rise each time he did. His phone buzzed, snapping him out of his reverie. It was a text from Zoe. "How are you feeling today?" Alex smiled as he typed his response. "Better than I've ever felt. Not just physically, but mentally. I've finally learned to let go." He hit send and leaned back in his chair, the smile lingering on his face. It felt good to admit it. The fear of failure, the constant need for perfection, it had all been holding him back. But now, he was free. Free from the weight of his past mistakes, free from the anxiety of what might happen next. He could finally focus on living in the present. The cramps would still come, he knew that. There would be times when his body would remind him of its limitations. But that was okay. He didn't need to be perfect. He just needed to keep moving forward, keep learning, and keep growing. There was beauty in the imperfections, beauty in the struggles. The key was to embrace them, not fight against them. Over the next few weeks, Alex continued to follow his routines, but with a newfound sense of ease. He still ate his spinach smoothies, still stretched his legs, but now he did it with the understanding that his worth wasn't tied to a perfect body or a flawless routine. His worth was found in his resilience, his ability to adapt, and his willingness to keep going, no matter what. He found himself taking longer walks, running a little farther, and most importantly, enjoying the freedom that came with letting go of the constant fear that had once ruled his life. The cramps were no longer a dark cloud hanging over him. They were just part of the journey, and he was ready to face them with courage and confidence. As the months passed, Alex's life began to look different. He wasn't just stronger physically, he was stronger emotionally. He had learned to trust his body, trust his instincts, and trust the process. He had discovered that healing wasn't about controlling every outcome, it was about showing up for yourself, no matter what, and allowing room for growth. One afternoon, as he sat in a cafe sipping his coffee, Alex received a message from an old friend, Ben. It was a simple message, but one that made Alex's heart swell with gratitude. "Hey, Alex, I've been following your journey, and I just wanted to say, you're an inspiration. Seeing how far you've come, how much you've grown, it's made me rethink my own life. Thanks for showing me what true strength looks like." For a moment, Alex was speechless. He didn't need the praise, but it felt good to know that his journey had made an impact on someone else. He had been so focused on his own healing, his own struggles, that he hadn't realized how far his story had reached. He smiled to himself, realizing that this was the ultimate reward, not just overcoming his own battles, but inspiring others to do the same. He had turned his pain into strength, and that strength was now helping others find their own. As Alex walked out of the cafe, the sun setting in the distance, he felt a deep sense of peace. He had come full circle. He was no longer defined by his struggles or his limitations. He was defined by his ability to rise, to learn, and to keep moving forward. The cramps may have been a part of his journey, but they were no longer the center of it. His story was one of growth, of resilience, and of the unwavering belief that, no matter what, he would always keep going. And that was enough. A month had passed since Alex's breakthrough moment, and things had begun to feel normal. In the best possible way. His legs, once plagued by the constant threat of cramps, now carried him through his days without issue. He could take long walks without worrying about his muscles tightening, he could stretch without fear of a sudden, searing pain shooting through him. But even more importantly, his mindset had shifted in ways he hadn't anticipated. He was no longer focused solely on the physical, on the cramps or the discomfort. He was focused on living. The journey had been long, but it had taught him things he never would have expected. His emotional growth, his newfound peace, had become just as important as the physical strength he had gained. Every step forward, every day without pain, was a reminder that life, in its most authentic form, was about balance. It was about accepting both the struggles and the triumphs, and allowing each to shape him, not define him. That morning, Alex woke up to the sound of birds chirping outside his window. The soft light of dawn filtered through the blinds, casting a warm glow across his room. He stretched, feeling the familiar tightness in his legs, but no pain, no cramps. Just the usual early morning stiffness. He smiled to himself, grateful for the simple gift of being able to move freely. After getting ready, he sat down at his kitchen table to have breakfast, a smoothie made from spinach, banana, and almond butter, as usual. It was becoming second nature now, his body craving the nourishment it needed, his mind at peace with the routine he had created for himself. His phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was Zoe. "Good morning. Are you free for lunch today?" the text read. Alex grinned, feeling the warmth of their growing friendship. The conversations they'd had over the past few months had helped him realize that he didn't need to go through this journey alone. They had talked about everything, his cramps, his fears, his dreams for the future. Zoe had always been there, a steady support system, someone who believed in him even when he struggled to believe in himself. "Absolutely," Let's meet at that cafe near the park. I'll be there in an hour, Alex replied. He felt a sense of excitement, not because it was anything extraordinary, but because he was looking forward to something so simple. A lunch with a friend, a time to reconnect, to laugh, to talk about life. It felt like a new beginning in so many ways, a moment to embrace the present and all the possibilities it offered. The cafe was warm and cozy, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. Zoe was already seated at a table by the window when Alex arrived. She looked up, her face lighting up when she saw him. "Hey! It's so good to see you," she said, standing up to give him a hug. "How's everything going?" Alex returned the hug, feeling a wave of gratitude for her presence in his life. He sat down across from her, and they quickly fell into easy conversation. They talked about everything and nothing, work, life, the latest book they were reading, and, of course, how Alex had been feeling physically and emotionally. "I can't believe how far you've come," Zoe said, taking a sip of her coffee. "When I think about where you started, and where you are now, it's honestly inspiring. You've gone through so much, and yet here you are, stronger than ever." Alex smiled, but a wave of humility washed over him. "I couldn't have done it without your help," he said. "Your support made all the difference." Zoe shook her head. "I just reminded you what you already knew deep down. You had everything you needed inside you. It was just a matter of unlocking it." Her words struck Alex deeply. He had spent so long feeling like he needed to be fixed, as though something outside of him held the key to his healing. But as Zoe had pointed out, the power had always been within him. The strength, the resilience, it was all a part of him, and it always had been. He just had to learn how to recognize it. As they finished their lunch, Alex felt a sense of peace and completion wash over him. This chapter of his life, the one dominated by fear and uncertainty, was behind him. He wasn't just moving past the cramps, he was moving into a new phase of his life, one where he could embrace uncertainty without it paralyzing him. He could face whatever came his way, knowing that he had the strength to endure it. On his way home, Alex couldn't help but reflect on everything he had learned. Healing wasn't linear. It wasn't a neat, predictable path. It was full of detours, setbacks, and unexpected moments of growth. But through it all, he had learned the most important lesson of all. That life wasn't about perfection. It was about progress. It was about taking things one day at a time and trusting that the journey itself was where the true magic happened. Later that evening, as Alex sat by the window of his apartment, looking out at the city, he felt a deep sense of gratitude. The cramps may have been a part of his story, but they no longer defined him. They were just a small chapter in a much larger tale. The road ahead was wide open, full of possibilities, full of new beginnings. And for the first time in a long time, Alex felt ready to walk it, without fear, without regret, and with the full knowledge that he was strong enough to face whatever came next. As the weeks passed, Alex felt the rhythm of his life settling into a new, comfortable pattern. His mornings were calm, starting with a healthy breakfast and a walk around the park to stretch his legs. His body had become accustomed to the routines he had built, and while he still experienced the occasional stiffness or discomfort, he no longer feared the cramps. Instead, they had become reminders of how far he had come, markers of his progress. But life, as always, had a way of introducing new challenges. It started with a simple text message from his boss one Friday afternoon: "Alex, can you stay late today to help with the presentation for next week's client meeting? We need to nail this." The request didn't seem so bad at first. After all, Alex had been working hard and was used to staying late on occasion. But something inside him shifted. The idea of working late, of pushing himself further, triggered a wave of anxiety that he couldn't ignore. His mind started racing. What if the stress affected his body? What if he stayed up too late, neglected his self-care, and triggered another round of cramps? It wasn't just the cramps that worried him, it was the fear of losing control again. The fear that one lapse, one misstep, could send him spiraling back into the dark place he had fought so hard to escape. Alex sat down on the edge of his bed, staring at his phone. He didn't want to be that person again, the one who gave in to stress, who let fear dictate his choices. But here it was, right in front of him. Another test. Another opportunity to prove that he had truly changed. He took a deep breath and began to think through his options. He could say no, but that might affect his standing at work. He could say yes, but at what cost? He had worked so hard to find balance, to give his body the care and attention it needed. Would this project jeopardize that? In the end, Alex decided to call Zoe. Over the months, their conversations had grown deeper, and he had come to value her perspective. She had become more than just a friend, she was a guide, a reminder that he didn't have to navigate the hard moments alone. Zoe answered quickly. "Hey, what's up?" "I just got a text from work," Alex explained, his voice tinged with uncertainty. "They need me to stay late for a big presentation next week. It's a lot of pressure, and I'm not sure I want to push myself that hard again. I've worked so hard to keep my routine, but what if it messes things up?" Zoe paused for a moment, then replied, "Alex, it's okay to say no. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've worked hard, you found your rhythm, and pushing yourself too hard could bring back the stress, and we both know what stress does to your body." Alex took a slow breath, appreciating her calm reassurance. "But I don't want to seem weak. I don't want them to think I'm not committed." "You're not weak," Zoe said firmly. "Being committed doesn't mean sacrificing your health. It's about knowing when to push and when to take a step back. You've worked hard to get here, and you deserve to protect the progress you've made. You don't have to say yes to everything." Her words hit him in a way he didn't expect. He had been so focused on pushing himself, on showing others that he could handle it all, that he had forgotten the importance of self-preservation. Zoe was right, commitment didn't mean exhaustion, and strength didn't mean overexertion. "I think I needed to hear that," Alex said softly. "Thanks." After hanging up, Alex sat in the quiet of his room, reflecting on what Zoe had said. She was right. He didn't have to prove anything to anyone, least of all himself. The journey he had been on, the growth he had experienced, it was not a race. It wasn't about pushing himself to the edge, but about finding peace with where he was, and trusting that every step forward was enough. He sent a reply to his boss, "I appreciate the opportunity, but I don't think I'll be able to stay late tonight. I've been working hard to find a balance, and I need to make sure I'm taking care of myself. I'll still be ready for Monday's meeting, and I'm confident I can contribute effectively." He hit send, a sense of relief washing over him. It felt like a small victory, not because he had resisted work, but because he had chosen himself. He had chosen his well-being over the demands of others. For once, he wasn't worried about what would happen next. He was simply living in the moment, with the knowledge that he was enough. The next few days went by without incident. Alex had taken Zoe's advice to heart, sticking to his routine and staying true to his needs. Work was still demanding, but he felt more in control than he had in a long time. The balance he had worked so hard to find remained intact, and the cramps that had once controlled his life were now just a distant memory. One evening, as Alex sat at home after a relaxing dinner, he received a text from Zoe. "I'm proud of you, you know," she wrote. "Not just for handling the work situation, but for learning how to put yourself first. That's true strength." Alex smiled as he read the message. He had always thought that strength meant pushing through, fighting against the pain, refusing to stop until he had reached his goal. But now, he realized that true strength wasn't just about endurance, it was about knowing when to stop, when to breathe, and when to trust that everything would work out in the end. That night, Alex went to bed with a sense of peace. He knew that challenges would always arise, new obstacles would present themselves, but he was ready. Not because he could handle everything, but because he had learned to trust his ability to navigate life with grace. The cramps may have been a part of his journey, but now he knew how to face them with resilience. The road ahead was full of unknowns, but for the first time, Alex felt prepared. Whatever came next, he was ready to face it with confidence, knowing that he had the strength to handle anything. The days seemed to stretch out in a calming rhythm for Alex. After the stressful decision to decline the extra work hours, he found his life beginning to align in a way that felt almost effortless. Work was still demanding, but it no longer felt like a constant weight on his shoulders. He had learned how to navigate the demands of his job without letting them consume him. He had established boundaries, something that had seemed foreign to him just a few months ago, and now those boundaries were guiding him toward a more balanced and fulfilling life. The transformation wasn't just physical, it was mental and emotional as well. His mind, once clouded by fear and uncertainty, was clearer. He had begun to see each day as an opportunity to thrive, not just to survive. The cramps that had once controlled his life were now a distant memory, and instead of constantly fearing their return, Alex focused on nurturing his body and soul. He had found strength in this new lifestyle, a strength that wasn't about pushing limits but about honoring his limits. One evening, Alex decided to go for a long walk through the city park. He had been working through a series of projects at work, but this evening, he felt the need to step outside, to breathe, and to reflect on how far he had come. He had been taking small moments for himself, but tonight, he was craving something more, a chance to really let his mind wander and appreciate the quietude of the evening. The park was peaceful, the path lit by the soft glow of street lamps, and the air crisp with the promise of autumn. Alex walked slowly, letting the sound of his footsteps and the occasional rustling of leaves be the only company. As he walked, he found himself reflecting on his journey. He remembered the anxiety that once gripped him when he had to make even the smallest decisions about his health. He remembered the stress and the doubts, the cramps that seemed to haunt him. But now, that life felt far behind him. He had taken charge. He had found the key to not just managing his cramps but transforming the way he approached life. This journey had given him far more than physical relief, it had given him peace of mind. It had taught him that strength came from within, not from what others expected of him or from pushing through every obstacle at full force. Alex smiled to himself as he walked. He had reached a place where he no longer felt the pressure to do everything perfectly. Life, he realized, wasn't about achieving some idealized version of success or constantly measuring up to others' expectations. It was about progress, about showing up every day, doing the best you could, and being kind to yourself along the way. Just as he was about to sit on a bench near the pond, his phone buzzed in his pocket. It was Zoe. "Hey, are you free to chat?" she texted. Alex's smile widened as he sat down on the bench. He loved these spontaneous conversations. Zoe had become a grounding force in his life, someone who understood the challenges of the journey and also celebrated the victories, big and small. "Of course, what's up?" Alex typed back. A few moments later, his phone rang, and he answered. "Hey, how's it going?" Zoe's voice was warm, familiar. "I'm good," Alex replied. "Just out for a walk in the park, thinking about everything." "It's been a good day." "I'm glad to hear that," Zoe said, her voice filled with warmth. "I've been thinking about our last conversation. You really made a strong decision not to overwork yourself, and I'm proud of you for that. I know it wasn't easy." "It wasn't," Alex admitted. "But it feels right. I'm learning that saying no isn't a sign of weakness, it's a way to protect myself, to keep moving forward without burning out." Zoe paused for a moment before responding. "You've come such a long way, Alex. When I first met you, you were so focused on fighting through everything. But now, you're in control. You're letting things come to you without forcing them." "That's what I've realized," Alex said, looking up at the clear sky above. "I spent so much time trying to force things, trying to control everything. But now, it's about trusting that things will unfold the way they're supposed to. It's like with the cramps. I used to be scared of them, and now I don't even think about them anymore. Zoe's voice softened. That's huge. And that's the beauty of this journey, you've learned how to find peace in the process, not just the outcome. Alex leaned back on the bench, his gaze wandering to the stars now emerging in the sky. Zoe's words resonated with him in a way that made him feel grounded, as though a new layer of understanding had settled within him. Yeah, he agreed slowly. It's about the journey, isn't it? Not just the destination. I'm learning that. There was a brief silence, comfortable and reflective, before Zoe spoke again. I'm proud of the way you're embracing this new phase of your life. You're not just surviving anymore, you're thriving. You're living. Alex smiled, a deep sense of gratitude filling his chest. Thank you, Zoe. I couldn't have done it without your support. I think that's what makes all the difference. Having someone in your corner, you know. Zoe's voice was filled with affection. Of course. That's what friends are for. As their conversation continued, Alex's heart swelled with the realization of just how much he had changed. He was no longer consumed by fear or doubt. He had learned to trust himself, his body, and the process of life. The cramps, once a daily struggle, were now nothing more than a memory. And with each day, he felt more confident that he could continue to navigate whatever challenges came his way. That night, as Alex headed home, he felt lighter than he had in months. He knew the road ahead would still present challenges. Life would always have its ups and downs. But for the first time in a long time, Alex felt prepared. He was learning to embrace the balance he had worked so hard to achieve. And in that balance, he knew he would find the strength to face whatever came next. As Alex settled into his new routine, life felt like it had finally found a rhythm. His work was steady, his physical health remained strong, and his mental state was clearer than ever. He had begun to believe that, maybe for the first time in his life, things were falling into place. The deep-rooted tension that had once defined his every decision, his every movement, had dissolved. It wasn't that life had become easy, far from it, but Alex had learned how to approach it with a sense of calm that had eluded him for so long. However, as life often goes, just when things seemed stable, an unexpected challenge emerged. It started with a late-night email from his boss, Chris. The subject line was simple, urgent, please review ASAP. Alex's heart sank as he clicked on the email. In it, Chris explained that one of their major clients had voiced concerns about the direction of a project, and Alex, as the project lead, needed to prepare a presentation to address these concerns by the end of the week. A sense of dread crept up Alex's spine. The weight of responsibility that came with the request felt like 1,000 pounds on his shoulders. The client was one of the biggest accounts the company had, and any mistake could mean the loss of a crucial partnership. Alex had been through stressful projects before, but this one felt different. The pressure was immense, and suddenly, he was thrust back into that familiar place of anxiety and uncertainty. His first instinct was to retreat, to find comfort in his established routine and avoid diving headfirst into the stress. But the reality of the situation was that he had no choice. He had to step up. The night felt long as Alex worked to prepare the presentation. His mind raced as he juggled one task after another. In a haze of PowerPoint slides, notes, and endless revisions, the world outside his office seemed to blur. The weight of the project became all-consuming, and with each passing hour, the tension in his body began to return. His back tightened. His neck stiffened. And just as he had feared, a sharp pain shot through his calf, a reminder of the physical cost of stress. Alex stood up from his desk, his mind swirling with frustration. He had worked so hard to get to this place where he could manage stress, where he could finally feel in control of his body. But here he was, back in the thick of it, with the familiar feeling of being overwhelmed. The cramp in his leg pulsed painfully, and for a moment, Alex could do nothing but lean against his desk, breathing through the discomfort. He didn't want to slip back into the mindset that had once consumed him. The panic, the fear of failure, the feeling that everything would fall apart if he didn't keep pushing. But as the pain throbbed, Alex couldn't help but feel that old anxiety returning, crawling back into his mind. He needed a moment. He needed to step away from the situation. Alex grabbed his phone and texted Zoe, "I'm struggling. Big project at work, and the pressure is getting to me. I thought I had this, but now I feel like I'm back to square one." The response came quickly, "Breathe, Alex. I know it's hard, but remember what you've learned. You don't have to do it all at once. Step back, take a break, and when you're ready, tackle it one piece at a time. You've got this." Her words were simple, but they cut through the fog of anxiety that had clouded his mind. He read them again, letting the calmness of her tone seep into him. Zoe was right. He had learned so much in the past few months about how to manage stress, how to trust himself, and how to take care of his body. This was just another test, another challenge, but it didn't have to control him. Alex took a deep breath, sitting down on the edge of his bed and closing his eyes. The pain in his leg began to subside, and with it, a wave of clarity washed over him. The cramp hadn't been a sign of failure, it was simply a signal from his body that he needed to pause. He had spent too much time at his desk, too much time under the weight of expectations. The lesson here was not that he had failed, but that he needed to recognize when to step back, to give himself the space to breathe and regroup. With a new sense of resolve, Alex stood up and made himself a cup of tea. He sat down at the table, breathing deeply, focusing on the simple act of sipping the warm liquid. Slowly, his mind cleared. The panic receded. He had the tools he needed to move forward. Instead of continuing to work through the night in a haze of exhaustion, Alex decided to go to bed. He knew that tomorrow would bring clarity and focus if he gave himself the rest he needed. The next morning, Alex woke up feeling surprisingly refreshed. The weight of the project was still there, but it no longer felt as oppressive. His leg no longer ached, and the tension that had been gnawing at him had subsided. He had faced the physical and mental challenge of the night, and he had come out stronger on the other side. With a renewed sense of focus, Alex spent the morning reviewing the project details with a clear mind. He broke down the presentation into manageable pieces, taking one task at a time. Each step, no matter how small, felt like a victory. He no longer felt overwhelmed by the enormity of the task. Instead, he felt empowered by his ability to take control of the situation. As the day went on, Alex made steady progress. By the end of the afternoon, the presentation was almost complete. He took a moment to reflect on the fact that, despite the setback, he had managed to stay grounded. He hadn't let the stress consume him, and he hadn't let the cramps return in full force. He had learned to take breaks, to manage his emotions, and to trust in his abilities. Before he sent the presentation off to his boss, Alex texted Zoe once more, "Got through it. Didn't let the stress win. Thanks for being there." Zoe's reply was instant, "You've got this. Always proud of you." Alex smiled, feeling a sense of pride in the work he had done, and in the person he was becoming. He had faced an unexpected setback, and while it had tested him, it had also proven how far he had come. The journey wasn't over, but with each challenge, Alex was learning to navigate the highs and lows with grace. The day after sending off his presentation, Alex felt a sense of accomplishment wash over him. The project had been a massive undertaking, and even though he was far from the type to celebrate his victories out loud, he couldn't help but feel proud of how he'd handled the pressure. It had been a major test, and he had passed, not just because he finished the project on time, but because he had done it without succumbing to the stress that would have normally derailed him. That evening, as he sat at his kitchen table with a cup of chamomile tea, he reflected on everything that had led to this moment. His journey over the last few months had been transformative. He had gone from constantly fighting his body's signals and being overwhelmed by stress to understanding the power of balance. He had learned that success wasn't just about pushing harder or achieving more, it was about managing himself, his health, and his happiness. It was a quiet realization, one that crept up on him as he lived through each challenge and embraced each new lesson. For years, he had defined success in the traditional sense, climbing the corporate ladder, receiving recognition, and checking off the boxes of societal expectations. But lately, his definition of success had shifted. It wasn't just about achievements, it was about the journey, the small moments, and the growth that happened along the way. As the evening wore on, a thought kept echoing in his mind. What if success wasn't about achieving everything he thought he wanted, but rather about accepting where he was and embracing each stage of his life? The next morning, Alex got to work early. He was feeling energized and motivated, not because he had another big project ahead of him, but because he felt like he was living in alignment with his true self. He had found a sense of inner peace that no amount of professional success could have provided on its own. There was a confidence in that peace, a quiet assurance that he was exactly where he needed to be. At lunch, Alex received a text from Zoe. "How's the project going? You okay?" He smiled and replied, "All done. Feels good to have it off my plate. It was a challenge, but I managed to keep my head straight through it." Zoe responded almost immediately. "I'm proud of you. Honestly, you've come such a long way. A few months ago, you would have been burning the midnight oil and stressing yourself out, but you handled it with such grace." Alex paused for a moment, considering her words. It was true. His old self would have been working late into the night, struggling to maintain control, not stopping until the job was done, no matter the toll it took on his body or mind. But now, he realized, success had nothing to do with working yourself into the ground. It had everything to do with managing stress, prioritizing well-being, and knowing when to step back. "I think I'm starting to understand what you meant when you said, grace. It's not about perfection, it's about balance," he texted back. Zoe's reply was quick, "Exactly. And now you're defining success in your own terms, not someone else's." That night, as Alex relaxed in his living room, he thought about Zoe's words. For so long, he had been driven by the idea of what success looked like on paper. But now, he was learning that success wasn't just about accolades and achievements. It was about finding peace in the process, celebrating the small wins, and embracing the inevitable setbacks as part of the journey. It was about accepting himself, body and mind, and trusting that every step forward, no matter how small, was a step toward a better version of himself. The next few weeks brought a new rhythm to Alex's life. He felt more in tune with himself than ever. His physical health remained steady, his mental state was stronger, and he had a newfound sense of clarity when it came to his work. There were challenges, of course, there always were, but Alex was no longer consumed by them. He had learned that challenges didn't have to define him. He could face them with confidence, knowing that he had the tools and mindset to navigate whatever came his way. One afternoon, Alex sat down for coffee with his coworker, Mark, who had been a friendly face in the office for years. Mark had always been the type to work long hours, constantly chasing after promotions and recognition. But recently, Alex noticed a shift in Mark's energy. He seemed more relaxed, less frantic. "So, how's everything going with you?" Alex asked, taking a sip of his coffee. Mark leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful look on his face. "Actually, I've been thinking about something lately. I've been pushing myself really hard, always trying to get ahead. But it's starting to feel like it's taking more out of me than I've been willing to admit." Alex raised an eyebrow. "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm starting to realize that I've been so focused on getting promoted, on reaching the next milestone, that I've neglected a lot of other things in my life. I've let my health, my relationships, my happiness take a back seat to this constant drive for success." Alex smiled gently, his words coming from a place of understanding. "I know exactly how that feels. But the thing is, you don't have to burn yourself out to be successful. True success comes from balance. It's about understanding when to push and when to pull back. I've learned that the hard way." Mark nodded slowly, processing Alex's words. "Yeah, I think I'm starting to get it. Maybe it's time for me to redefine what success means for me." Alex nodded, feeling a sense of camaraderie with his coworker. They had both been through their own struggles with work, success, and balance. But Alex now felt like he was on the other side, having learned that the key to real success wasn't in the grind. It was in the peace that came with living a balanced life. As Alex's days continued to unfold in their new rhythm, something began to shift within him. He had long believed that his path in life was a straight line, one that led through his job, his goals, and his endless ambition. But now, as he looked out of his apartment window one quiet evening, he started to realize something profound: not every path had to be a straight line. In fact, sometimes the most rewarding journeys were those that meandered, twisted, and branched off into unexpected directions. It had been several months since Alex had taken the time to reflect on what mattered most to him. He had made significant strides in improving his physical health, cultivating a healthier mindset, and creating a balanced life. But there was still a lingering sense that something was missing. Despite everything he had achieved, there was an unspoken truth that he had yet to fully acknowledge: the things he was holding onto were no longer serving him. That evening, as he sat with his journal in front of him, Alex started to write down his thoughts. What was it that still held him back? It didn't take long for the answer to surface: his attachment to the past. He had been so focused on building a version of his life that he thought he should have, a life dictated by societal expectations, professional benchmarks, and old habits, that he hadn't allowed himself the space to fully embrace the present or future. There were memories and relationships that, while once important, no longer aligned with the man he had become. Letting go of them wasn't about forgetting. Alex would never forget the people and experiences that had shaped him, but it was about giving himself permission to move forward. The more Alex reflected on it, the more he realized how much emotional weight he had been carrying. Relationships that no longer brought him joy, habits that drained his energy, and expectations that were self-imposed but unrealistic. These were the things he needed to release. It was time to embrace a new chapter, free from the ghosts of the past. The next day, Alex decided to take a leap and clean out his old office at work. Over the years, his desk had accumulated trinkets, old papers, and reminders of goals he had long since outgrown. Some of these items had sentimental value, but most of them were just clutter, symbols of a version of himself he no longer identified with. As he cleared out the old files, he came across a small box filled with mementos from his earlier career, business cards from old contacts, thank you notes from clients, and even a framed picture from his first corporate presentation. For a moment, Alex stood still, staring at the picture. The man in the frame was so different from who he was now. He was younger, more eager, and driven by the promise of success. Alex smiled at the memory of that version of himself, but he knew it was time to let go. He picked up the picture and gently placed it in the recycling bin, then walked back to his desk. There was something incredibly freeing about that simple act of release. It wasn't about discarding the past, it was about making space for the future. Later that week, Alex met with Zoe for coffee. As they sat down at their favorite cafe, Zoe immediately noticed the change in his energy. He looked lighter, more at peace. You seem different, Zoe said, raising an eyebrow. What's going on? Alex smiled. I think I'm starting to really let go of things I've been holding onto for too long. Old expectations, old relationships, even things from my career that aren't part of who I am anymore. Zoe nodded, taking a sip of her coffee. That's huge. I think it's really powerful when we finally let go of things that no longer serve us. We hold on to them because we think we need them, but often, they're the very things that weigh us down. Yeah, Alex said, his voice softening. I didn't realize how much I was carrying around until I started clearing things out. It feels like a weight has been lifted. I feel freer, like I can actually move forward now. Zoe smiled warmly. It's so true. Letting go isn't about losing something, it's about making space for something better. It's like decluttering your life, emotionally and mentally. And when you do that, you're able to welcome new experiences and growth in ways you never thought possible. Alex nodded, feeling a sense of clarity wash over him. He had been so focused on building a future based on his past that he hadn't fully embraced the potential of the present. But now, with each thing he let go of, each old memento, each outdated goal, each lingering attachment, he was making room for new opportunities to unfold. The following weekend, Alex decided to take a solo trip to the countryside. He had always been someone who thrived on being busy, on having a packed schedule, and being constantly surrounded by people. But lately, he had started to crave solitude, a quiet space where he could truly reflect and connect with himself without distraction. The small cabin he rented was nestled at the edge of a forest, far from the bustle of city life. When Alex arrived, he immediately felt a sense of calm. The air was crisp, the sounds of nature filled his ears, and the isolation felt like a balm for his soul. For the next few days, he spent his time hiking, reading, and reflecting. He journaled about his journey, about the things he had let go of and the things he still needed to release. As he sat on a large rock by the river one afternoon, looking out at the gentle flow of the water, Alex had a quiet epiphany. He wasn't just letting go of physical things, he was letting go of old identities. He had been so attached to the version of himself that had always been striving for more, that had believed he had to achieve perfection in order to be worthy. But now, he understood that the person he was, right here, right now, was enough. He didn't need to prove anything to anyone. For the first time in a long time, Alex felt truly free. When he returned to the city, Alex was a different person. He wasn't burdened by the past or weighed down by the expectations that once defined him. Instead, he was focused on the present, on enjoying the small moments, appreciating the relationships that brought him joy, and finding fulfillment in his work without losing himself in it. In the weeks that followed his time in the countryside, Alex felt a profound shift in his approach to life. Letting go of past attachments had been freeing, but now came the real work, rebuilding. He realized that finding true strength wasn't about how much he could accomplish, how many hurdles he could leap over, or how fast he could climb the ladder. It was about inner strength, learning to stand tall in the face of uncertainty, challenges, and even failure, without losing sight of his core values. One afternoon, as he walked through the park on his lunch break, Alex had an idea. He wanted to do something that would push him outside of his comfort zone, something that would help him physically, mentally, and emotionally reconnect with his body in a way that would ground him for the future. He had always been someone who relied heavily on external validation, whether it was from his work or from the people around him. But now, he realized he needed to find validation from within. He signed up for a local fitness challenge, one that involved a combination of strength training, endurance tests, and mental resilience exercises. It wasn't about competing with others, it was about testing his own limits. He wanted to prove to himself that he had the strength to push through discomfort, to embrace vulnerability, and to trust in his own abilities. The first few days of training were grueling. Alex had never been someone who enjoyed pushing his body to the limit. Sure, he had done his fair share of gym sessions in the past, but this challenge was different. It was intense, physically demanding, and often uncomfortable. But each day, as he completed another session, Alex felt a sense of accomplishment. With every drop of sweat, with every sore muscle, he was building something inside himself that wasn't just about the physical strength, it was about mental fortitude. He had always been quick to abandon tasks when they became too difficult or uncomfortable. But now, Alex realized that real strength came from staying in the moment, embracing the discomfort, and continuing to push forward despite it. He had been running away from discomfort his whole life, whether it was work stress, personal conflicts, or moments of emotional vulnerability. But this challenge taught him that strength wasn't about avoiding discomfort, it was about facing it head-on and overcoming it, one step at a time. The first week was the hardest. His body was sore, his mind was filled with doubts, and he questioned whether he had made the right decision. But as he pushed through the physical pain, Alex realized that it wasn't just his muscles that were being tested, it was his mind. He had spent so many years trying to avoid challenges that now, when he finally faced one head-on, it felt like a revelation. One morning, after a particularly tough workout, Alex sat on a bench outside the gym, exhausted but proud. He had just completed an intense set of sprints that had left him breathless and dizzy, but he felt more alive than he had in months. As he caught his breath, a thought crossed his mind: true strength isn't just about what you can do physically. It's about how you respond to life's challenges. In that moment, Alex knew that he was no longer the man who had hidden from challenges. He wasn't the person who let fear dictate his actions. He had learned to confront challenges, to sit with discomfort, and to push through the moments of doubt. As he walked back to his office that afternoon, Alex felt a renewed sense of confidence. He had found a new source of strength, one that didn't come from external validation or achievements, but from deep within himself. And for the first time in a long time, he felt truly invincible. Not because he could handle everything life threw at him, but because he had learned how to persevere, no matter the obstacles. That night, as he was winding down before bed, Alex thought about the journey he had been on. There had been so many moments of doubt, so many times when he felt like he wasn't enough, or that his efforts weren't yielding results. But now, he realized that those moments of doubt were part of the process. They were what shaped him, what helped him grow. Every time he overcame a challenge, whether it was physical, emotional, or mental, he became stronger. He smiled as he looked at himself in the mirror. He had spent so much of his life chasing external markers of success, thinking that they would bring him happiness and fulfillment. But now, he understood that true fulfillment came from within, from his own strength, resilience, and ability to embrace life's challenges without fear. As Alex continued his training over the next few weeks, he began to notice a profound change not just in his physical body, but in his overall perspective on life. He started tackling problems at work with a new mindset, approaching each task with determination and the belief that he could handle whatever came his way. He no longer feared failure. Instead, he welcomed it as an opportunity to grow. One afternoon, while out for a walk with Zoe, he shared some of his thoughts with her. "I've been thinking a lot lately about strength," he said. "For so long, I thought strength was about pushing harder, achieving more, and always being in control. But now I realize it's about being able to face the challenges that come your way without letting them break you. It's about resilience." Zoe smiled. "That's a powerful realization. Strength isn't about avoiding failure or setbacks. It's about how you respond when they happen. And from what I can see, you've been responding with a lot of strength." Alex nodded, feeling a sense of pride. "It's funny. I used to think that strength meant never showing weakness. But now, I see that true strength is about embracing vulnerability, about pushing through discomfort, and finding peace in the chaos." Zoe looked at him thoughtfully. "It's about balance, isn't it? You found a way to balance work, health, and your inner peace. It's a journey, but you're on the right track." Alex couldn't help but agree. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was on the right path, not just in terms of his career or his fitness, but in terms of his whole self. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but he now understood that true strength didn't lie in having all the answers. It was about finding peace in the uncertainty and trusting himself to navigate it, one step at a time. With each passing week, Alex continued to evolve, not just in terms of his physical strength, but in how he viewed his place in the world. His training had opened up new doors for him, not just in the gym, but in his own understanding of what it meant to succeed. He had spent years defining success by the standards of others, by promotions, accolades, and external achievements. But now, as he stood on the verge of something new, he felt the pull to rethink everything he had once thought about success. One evening, after another exhausting but exhilarating workout, Alex found himself sitting at his favorite cafe, a quiet spot where he often came to reflect. As the warmth of the coffee cup seeped into his hands, he let his mind wander. What does success really mean to me? For so long, his version of success had been rooted in external validation, rising to the top of his field, earning respect, and achieving the kind of recognition that came with hard work and ambition. But now, as he looked back on his journey, he began to wonder if that was enough. Was he truly happy? Was this what fulfillment felt like? The question lingered in the back of his mind as he flipped open his journal. He began writing, the words flowing easily as he reflected on his life and where he had come from. "I've spent so much of my life chasing something that seemed important at the time," he wrote. "But now, I realize I've been defining success by things that are outside of my control. Maybe it's time to define success by how I feel, by the relationships I nurture, by the peace I have within myself. Maybe that's what true success really looks like." As he reread his words, Alex felt a deep sense of clarity. Success wasn't just about titles and accomplishments, it was about fulfillment. It was about having the freedom to live in alignment with one's values, to nurture relationships that brought joy, and to experience life with a sense of purpose and inner peace. The more he thought about it, the more it became clear, his new definition of success was about balance, balancing career, health, relationships, and personal fulfillment. It wasn't about being the best at everything, but rather about doing what made him feel alive, connected, and content. This realization prompted Alex to take action. He had been working tirelessly to climb the corporate ladder, always pushing himself harder to secure a higher position. But now, as he considered the meaning of success, he realized that his priorities needed to shift. The job he had worked so hard to attain no longer felt fulfilling in the way it once did. He had come to value freedom, freedom to explore new passions, freedom to travel, freedom to spend time with the people who truly mattered. So, Alex made the decision to scale back. He had been promoted to a senior position in the company, but the responsibilities that came with it were consuming. The long hours, constant meetings, and never-ending emails had drained him. It was time for a change that would allow him to pursue his passions and focus on the things that brought him true joy. He scheduled a meeting with his manager, Sarah, a woman he respected deeply but one who also had a very traditional view of career progression. She expected him to take on more responsibilities, to lead larger teams, and to continue moving up the corporate ladder. But Alex knew that wasn't the life he wanted anymore. As he walked into Sarah's office, he felt a mix of nervousness and determination. He had always been a hard worker, the one who never shied away from a challenge. But today, he was going to make a different kind of decision, a decision that was centered around his happiness, not his career trajectory. "Sarah, I've been doing a lot of thinking," Alex began. "And I've come to a realization. I need to take a step back from my current role." Sarah's expression shifted to one of surprise, and she leaned forward in her chair. "What do you mean, Alex? You've worked so hard for this position. You've been an integral part of the team." "I know, and I'm grateful for the opportunities I've had," Alex said. "But I've realized that success isn't just about climbing the corporate ladder anymore. It's about balance. It's about having time to focus on things that matter more to me, like my health, relationships, and personal growth. I want to explore new things, take on projects that bring me joy, and have the space to focus on my well-being." There was a moment of silence before Sarah spoke again, her voice a little softer now. "Alex, I understand where you're coming from. It's a hard decision, but I respect it. You've always been a valuable asset to this company. If this is what you need, I support your decision." Alex felt a wave of relief wash over him. It wasn't easy to make such a big change, especially when it meant stepping away from something that had been the focal point of his life for so long. But deep down, he knew it was the right choice. He had been chasing a version of success that no longer resonated with who he was or who he wanted to become. The following weeks were a mix of excitement and uncertainty. Alex didn't immediately know what his next steps would be, but he felt liberated by the decision. He spent more time working on his personal projects, things he had always been passionate about but had never had the time to pursue. He started volunteering with a local charity, using his skills to help others, and began exploring the possibility of launching his own business, one that aligned more with his values. He also rekindled his relationships with family and friends, realizing just how much he had neglected them in the pursuit of his old definition of success. Now, he had the time and energy to nurture those relationships, to be present in the lives of the people who mattered most to him. Zoe, as always, was a source of support throughout this process. One afternoon, as they sat together, Alex shared his thoughts. "I feel like I've finally understood what success really means," he said, looking out at the setting sun. "It's not about how many hours I put in at work or how high I climb up the ladder. It's about being fulfilled, about feeling like I'm living authentically and giving back in ways that matter." Zoe smiled, her eyes reflecting the same understanding. "Exactly. Success is about living in alignment with your values and finding happiness in the small moments. I'm so proud of you, Alex. You're creating a life that feels true to who you are." Alex stood at the edge of a new chapter in his life. After months of reflecting, redefining his goals, and making bold decisions, he finally felt the sense of freedom that had eluded him for so long. The choices he had made, particularly stepping away from his corporate job and deciding to pursue what truly mattered to him, had been daunting. But now, looking back, he couldn't help but feel an overwhelming sense of peace. It was the first morning after he had officially left his corporate position. The day stretched ahead of him, filled with possibilities, but also with questions. What would he do next? How would he move forward? The uncertainty no longer scared him the way it once did. In fact, he welcomed it, knowing that he was creating his own path, one that was authentic and true to himself. He had spent so many years living in the shadow of expectations, his own, as well as those of his family, friends, and society. But now, for the first time, he was living for himself. And that feeling of autonomy, of control over his own future, was intoxicating. That morning, he took a walk through the park near his apartment. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a golden glow over the city. The world around him felt alive, buzzing with possibility. He thought about how far he had come, from the man who once relied on external validation, to the person who now found strength and purpose from within. As he walked, Alex couldn't help but think about the lessons he had learned along the way. Each chapter of his journey had brought him closer to this moment, the realization that success isn't defined by external achievements, but by internal fulfillment. That true strength comes not from avoiding hardship, but from embracing it and growing through it. And that life's most valuable experiences often come from the moments of vulnerability and uncertainty. When Alex first left his job, he had wondered if he would regret the decision. Would he miss the comfort of a steady paycheck, the prestige of his position, the respect that came with climbing the corporate ladder? But now, standing here, he felt no regrets. If anything, he felt an immense sense of gratitude for the courage it had taken to make such a bold move. He had learned that life wasn't about waiting for the perfect opportunity or the ideal moment, it was about creating those moments. It was about taking risks, facing fears, and trusting in the process. For so long, Alex had been afraid of making the wrong choices, but now he realized that there was no wrong path, only the path that aligned with his values and aspirations. As he continued his walk, Alex thought about the people who had been a part of his journey, his family, his friends, and especially Zoe. Zoe had been his rock, supporting him when he doubted himself, encouraging him when he was uncertain, and reminding him that he was enough just as he was. He thought about how much he had learned from her, not just about love, but about self-love, about the importance of staying true to oneself, and about the value of balance in life. He smiled to himself, thinking about the conversations they had shared, the quiet moments of understanding, and the joy they had found in simply being together. Zoe had taught him that life was about quality, not quantity, quality of experiences, relationships, and moments. Zoe had also introduced him to a new perspective on health and wellness. As they had explored different ways of nourishing their bodies and minds, Alex had come to understand that health wasn't just about avoiding disease, it was about fostering a deep connection with his body, mind, and spirit. His journey toward physical strength had opened his eyes to the importance of nourishment, both from the food he ate and the energy he gave to his own soul. But as much as Alex had learned from others, he had also learned from himself. He had spent years trying to live up to the expectations of others, only to discover that those expectations were not his own. The process of stripping away those layers, of discovering his authentic self, had been challenging but ultimately liberating. Now, Alex was ready for the next chapter of his life. He didn't know exactly what it would look like, but he knew that whatever came next would be shaped by the principles he had embraced: authenticity, self-compassion, balance, and growth. One of the things Alex had realized during his journey was the importance of giving back. He had spent so much time focusing on his own struggles and aspirations that he hadn't fully recognized the power of contributing to others. As he walked through the park, he thought about how he could use his newfound freedom and knowledge to make a positive impact on the world around him. Alex began to brainstorm ideas. Perhaps he could start a mentorship program for young professionals, teaching them the value of self-care, balance, and resilience in their careers. Or maybe he could write a book, sharing the lessons he had learned along the way. The possibilities were endless, and for the first time in a long time, Alex felt a sense of excitement about the future. Later that afternoon, Alex met with Zoe at their favorite cafe. They sat in their usual spot by the window, sipping their drinks and talking about the future. "I've been thinking," Alex began, "about what comes next for me. I want to give back, to use what I've learned to help others who might be in the same place I was. Maybe it's through coaching or writing or something else entirely. I just feel like I've got so much to offer, and I want to make a difference." Zoe smiled. "I think that's amazing, Alex. You've come such a long way. And I know you'll inspire so many people by sharing your story." Alex felt a wave of gratitude wash over him. It wasn't just about his own journey anymore, it was about paying it forward, helping others find the strength and clarity that he had found. The sun was setting as they left the cafe, the streets bathed in a warm, golden glow. For the first time in a long time, Alex felt a sense of peace, a deep knowing that he was exactly where he needed to be. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?